Medin. Ahmabad. Okay, so we have some little breaks, but we continue. Before we round up the Quranic collection, the historical aspect of it. Okay, we have to understand some of the opposition. There's a lot of opposition, of course, from the scholars. Western scholarship, and these opposition from Western scholarship, they are used by Christians in order to in the arguments with Islam. Okay, these the speculations and the points that they bring up. And so far, Muslims have been able to answer the majority of their questions and their doubts. Now, there's a group of people, they are known as Orientalists. And Orient means the East. Okay, Orient means the East. So these are people who base their scholarship on the East. And because of the predominance of Islam in the East, a lot of their attention is towards the Arab civilization, Arab people, and Islam. And they have wrote a lot of stuff. And these are people who inform governments like America. They are the go-to people for Islam. They go to these people that ask them things for Islam. And the military, any training about Islam and anything to do with Islam, Arabs, they go to these people and they believe in these people, what they say. And so what they get wrong, the politicians also will get wrong, and the military heads. Okay? So that is why it is important that Muslims, be more aggressive in terms of putting out refutations. Okay, in the past they did it, but somehow these days they, like it's not done enough, because people bringing back arguments that we have already, when I say we Muslims, scholarship have already answered, and they're bringing it back as if it's something new, and like on the internet, they will say, for example, they will say, look at this, the Imam will tell you this in the mosque, the Imam will tell you this, but all those things have been addressed years ago, before the coming of the internet. But these people now find it out. And what deep about it is that some of the things that they're bringing up are in Islamic sources, and we know about it, right? And a lot of them are weak hadiths. Okay? But of course, they don't take our methodology of judging hadiths. They don't take it. They have if they see something against Islam, as far as they're concerned, that's strong because it's against Islam. Even if it is in a Muslim book, right? Because not everything in a Muslim book means that is Islam. Okay? Because, for example, let me give you a big example. There's a famous Tafsir Ibn Kathir Tafsir, right? Famous. English version. Word in Arabic is a go-to book when you start, if you are reading about Islam and reading Tafsir, and it's available in English. In that book, they mentioned that that the Quran mentioned Paul as an apostle, right? Because Allah says in the Quran, I can't remember the exact verse, but Allah says that two messengers were sent. A messenger was sent, and they were strengthened by two others, right? Because the students of Isa alayhi salam and the followers of Isa, the main people were called apostles. And apostle is somebody who carry a message. Okay, so if it translate that in Arabic, it would be Rasul, right? And so Allah said they backed them up with two others. And so he's saying in that book about Paul, right? And Muslims have already established that Paul is the person that corrupted the religion of Jesus alayhi salam. Because what Paul came with is not what Jesus brought. He was the person that, changed the stuff in the gospel of Isa alayhi salam. Right? Because there was a contest between him and the original followers of Isa, and because he associated himself with the Romans, and when the Romans came into power, his school became powerful, and that became what Christianity is today. But there was a contest. There were people, the Ebionites, the Nassaria, they don't believe in Trinity and all them things. They say Jesus is a messenger of Allah and things like that. And there's a guy called Arius from North Africa. He was well known in church history. He used to preach to that Jesus is a prophet of God and Allah is one and thing, right? And they rejected his teachings, and his teachings became strong in Germany at one point in time. So that is why when Islam came to North Africa, like Algeria, Libya, all them places, that whole North African coast had Christians, because when the Jews were oppressing the Jews who were Christians, remember, the first set of Christians was really Jewish people, right? Because it's Jews, Isa alayhi salam amongst. Let me say Israelite, because Jew is just one tribe, right? The Israelites. And what happened to them now is that they fled into North Africa where they were persecuted, and they established themselves there. And the followers of Jesus went there as a safe haven. So when Islam rose up and came to North Africa, that is why Islam spread so fast in North Africa, because the Aryans, most of them were Aryans, and they believed that they didn't believe, Jesus being the Son of God, and these different things. Some of them don't even believe that he was crucified like us, right? But they didn't give the explanation like the Quran that it appeared that they crucified him, but he was not crucified. It appeared to them like that they had crucified him. But Allah saved him, right? And so even if I and you was there and we was watching it looked like, yeah, they crucified him. You understand? So it's only Allah come years after and explain that no, they didn't crucify. They did not kill him, nor crucify him. It appeared like they carried out that thing, but Allah saved him from it. He survived it. So these people were there, and they were in conflict with the Pauline Church, and they end up winning out. The Pauline Church end up winning out, especially when Constantine, the ruler, he decided to unify the Roman Empire under Christianity, and he went with the Pauline doctrine. So that's how we have the Christians today. And slowly but surely they persecuted the Arianites and other small groups who did not accept their philosophy and beliefs, and they end up, exterminating most of them. So all we have from them is their writings, and some of them and mentions in books by people who try to refute them, and they mention their beliefs. That's how it is known today. So the Orientalists, going back to the Orientalists now, they have put forward many theories regarding the Quranic revelation. And there's some famous names that you might see if you study this topic. You'll see persons like Noel Dickey, Reverend Mingana, right? Especially these people. For example, Noel Dickey said that Muhammad Islam forgot the earliest revelation. And just 2 days ago, I heard a man, a Christian guy, who just be opposing Islam, right? And he said that, look, Prophet Muhammad forgot. And then he quoted a hadith from Bukhari, where the Prophet says that he got revelation and he was made to forget some. He was made to forget. And that is what we call they call it abrogation. Okay? There are a couple of verses that eventually were abrogated. They were not put into the final text. And that's what the Prophet was talking about. Okay? So he using that without watching the words that they used to describe it. He was made. Who made him forget it? Who abrogated it? Allah, because Allah gave it to him. So, So they interpret it like that. Then Reverend Mingana said that neither the Prophet, Islam, nor the Muslim community held the Quran in high esteem until long afterwards, when the Islamic State, with the Islamic community, had a rapid expansion. Okay? Now, what is interesting in this is that the same Bukhari they want to quote, we know that the Prophet ﷺ said at one time, do not write down anything from me except the Quran, because I don't want my sayings to be mixed up with the Quran. So at one time, they did not write any hadith. Right? He had banned it. Only thing there was to write down as religious text was the Quran. And then it's later on he allowed them to, he relaxed the ban and allowed them to, write hadith from him. Right? Because he did not want the hadiths to be mixed up with the Quran. And that is why today you have people in Islamic scholarship, they do not put the hadiths first. They do not put the Quran first. And some of them put the Quran and the hadiths on the same level. And it's not so. The Quran and the hadith is not on the same level. One is revelation from God. The second one is the recollection of people of what the Prophet either said, did, or approved. And these, what they remembered, was put to a method of trying to determine which was sound, which means that this really is something which the Prophet said, or this really was not what he said. And it is called the science of hadith criticism. Right? Because being somebody's memory, there's what do you call it? It's possible that sometimes somebody gets something wrong, or sometimes somebody misinterprets something. Okay, because Aisha, and she used to get upset with Abu Huraira a lot of times, because Abu Huraira was free in talking a lot of hadiths, and Aisha used to correct him. Aisha said, that is not what he meant. That nobody had it meant, and so she used to correct certain hadiths that came from the Prophet Islam. So even in the time of the companions, they apply hadith criticism. After them, the scholars also develop a form of hadith criticism. Like sometimes they have a report from the Prophet Islam, and they say, okay, this is a weak report, or this is not too strong, right? Because sometimes the hadith goes back to a companion, right, and it doesn't connect with the Prophet. Okay, he said the Prophet say, but he wasn't there. He got it from somebody else, but he didn't name the person who he get it from. Okay, and there are some hadiths go right back to the Prophet Islam. And those hadiths are called the golden chain, right? Because they go right back to the Prophet Islam. That the Prophet said to me, and so on, so on, so on, so on. So we have these situations. So he said that the Muslim community, nor the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu did not consider the Quran and did not held the Quran in high esteem, and that this only happened after the expansion of the Muslim community. Right? Historically, that could be shut down easy. And I said, the first things I said, to shut it down. The second thing to shut it down is when there had the dispute between Ali and Muawiyah, right? They put the Quran on their spears, right? And they held it up in the air, and they said that there is no judgment except the judgment of Allah. And Ali said to them, because they was using that to create real confusion, Ali said to them, Ali said, a statement of truth, because it's from the Quran. Right? You see a statement of truth. Right? But it is being applied wrongfully. Okay? Because Ali, when Ali became the caliph, they wanted him to immediately hunt down the people and them who were responsible for the death of Uthman, the third caliph. Okay? And Ali said what he was going to do, he was going to settle the Muslim community first, because the Muslim community was in disarray. People that had factions, and you see, want to settle on everybody before he deal with the judgment. And because of that statement, they caused more confusion because of that statement. Right? He never said he was not going to do it. What he said is that he wanted to settle the Muslim community first. And people use that settlement to cause confusion. So when you understand history, right, especially Muslim history, you can understand how things occur in your own community. For example, let's talk about the imamate of Imam Sadiq, right? There's a lot of people who want him to be exactly like Imam Yasin Abu Bakr, right? And there are some people who want to engage in some issues in the same way that it was done under Imam Yasin Abu Bakr, right? And so the position is to settle the community and strengthen their spirituality. He put in that forward as the main program that the community should be on, right? And people using that to cause confusion, right? Oh, you're soft, you ain't getting involved, and they create fitna from that. So the more fact them create fitna from that, you can see the truth in what he's trying to do. Because if these fellows were spiritually in tune, they will have understood that the Jamaat needs some spiritual cleansing and to stand up on its foot again. Okay? and to bring back the strength, right? Because you can't be rushing all day and you're not men all day and contending and they're not the Islamic life in shatters, they're not praying properly, they're not on no spirituality, they just want conflict. And they feel that by wanting conflict, then it's real Islam. You see them talk all them crap. Right? So if you understand the history, because the Prophet ﷺ said that when we go astray, we could go astray either as Jews or Christians. Right? And we have some of these attitudes among the Jews when Moses tell them, we're going to do so and so, or we're not going to do so and so. They took it upon themselves, to oppose him. Okay, and yes, you read about those oppositions in the Bible. Okay, and some of them will just the Creator destroy them and punish them and the different things. So these things will occur, but not in the same exact point-to-point way, but it will occur. Right? And we have to look at these things from our understanding of Islam. But if you don't understand that, right? If you don't understand what caused the fraction in Islam between the Sunnis and the Shias, okay, then you just be repeating these things over and over. Okay? You'll be repeating these things over and over because you're making the same mistakes that were made before. So, to say that the Quran was not held in high esteem, then why did the Muslims resort to putting the Quran upon their spears and hold up in the air and say, this is the only judgment. Any judgment is the judgment of Allah. But they did it to oppose Ali. So the Quran was in high esteem. So this is nonsense. And one scholar said approaching the issue from a logical viewpoint is sufficient to dispel these claims that these people were making. And he said that whether we believe in Muhammad as a prophet or not, Islam, because either way, he will have done his uttermost to preserve what he was claiming to be the word of Allah. Because the basic claim of the Prophet Muhammad Islam, he was a prophet. And this is what God revealed to him. So whether you believe he was a prophet or not, it's only common sense that what he said that God told him, he will have preserved it. Because that is the reason he's claiming prophethood, because he got revelation. So if instead we look at it from a logical standpoint, not even from no historical standpoint, right? The strength of his claim of being a prophet is the revelation. So why will he not save it? Okay, so I'm reading from the book I told you all that I put up on the chat, the book about about the history of the Quran. So preserving the book was connected to his claim to be a prophet. So you can say, look, I don't believe he's a prophet, but what he said, he preserved it, because what he said that came from God is the centerpiece of him being a prophet. Okay? So even self, he was a fraud. May Allah forgive us. Himself, if he say he's a fraud, then he had to keep up or preserve what he said, because what he said is what gave his claim to prophethood strength. So this is nonsense, right? And some of the example I give you of how they dealt with the Quran, you can see that this is not nonsense. And the community was known for memorizing the Quran, teaching the Quran, recording the Quran, compiling the Quran, and explaining the Quran. Okay? And we have to remember that although the Quran is a book, it was transmitted orally. So people wrote it down, and people also remembered it in orally. It was an oral teachings. Okay? Because a lot of the people couldn't read. And that is why the Muslim community was always trying to teach reading and writing to as much people as possible. You know, even during the conflicts that he had with the Quraysh, anybody from the Quraysh who could have read, and he told them that teach the Muslims, some Muslims to read, and you will get your freedom. You know, because they were captured, and they taught Muslims, and then they were freed. Okay, so there was always a program to bring the people up to standard. Right? So bring people up to standard. And this is very, very important. So, but they wrote it on whatever was available, because in those days paper was very expensive. Right? Paper came from Egypt. They made paper from the papyrus, you know, the papyrus plant, the flax, and they used to make paper with it. Even today, you can go and see, if you go to Egypt as a tourist, you can go to these places where they show you the process how they used to make paper. And it was very, very expensive. Okay? So what did they do? They wrote on the humps of the camel, not the humps, the legs, the camel, that part where the legs is attached to the rest of the body, that big part by the waist, they wrote on that. Scapula, the scapula. That's the biological name for it. They wrote on that big piece of bone. And they wrote on the date palm, when it's full, and you can pull off certain parts of it, right, on the top, and there's a big kind of surface you can write on, right? So he did all these different things in order to transmit the Quran. Right? And this is very, very important. Okay, and there's a lot of literature you can have access to, where the Prophet ﷺ, give you and show you how the Quran itself was done. There's a lot of reports in the Quran, in the Hadiths, how the Quran was transmitted. Okay, and when he got the verses, he told the companion, put this here, put that there, put that verse in this surah, put that. He organized it, because that was the seal, that was the proof of his prophethood. Okay, and even today, we use it as a proof. How come this man, who was not formally educated, he had no formal education, it don't mean he couldn't recognize his name, or he couldn't recognize a word, or he wasn't formally educated. Allah kept him like that so that what he recited in the Quran, how he knew that. How did he know this? And there are other things in the Quran that that this came from Allah, which I have no way he would have known that. And they were corroborated by science and history today. Let me give you an example. In the science of Egyptology, having to do with Egypt, the different dynasties, the belief, the traditions, and all these different things. We know that the rulers were called pharaohs. All of we know that, we see the Ten Commandments, which is a classic. When you're growing up, that was a must. Easter, you see the Ten Commandments. I think it still happens. People still, children are still exposed to that. It's like, wow, all these things happening. When you open the sea, and it's like, wow, for a child, right? And so we know about the Pharaoh, and they were called pharaohs. But in the Quran, the ruler in the time of Joseph, he was called a king. See? He was called a king. So people say, look, the Quran have a mistake. What do you call it? Is pharaohs. He never call them king. Never Egyptian word for king. They never, right? Until they did their research and they did their studies, and they said that the use of the word pharaoh came at a certain time. Okay? No, sorry. They were called king during a certain period in the dynasties in Egypt. Okay, so but the Quran already said that before. How did Prophet Islam know that? He's not an Egyptologist. And something that they didn't know is only recently they established, they found out and they established that, and a lot of Muslims use it in their dawah. Okay? So they corroborate, the Quran corroborate what history said before it was known. Okay, so the question is, how did Prophet Muhammad know that? All right? What is the possibilities that this could happen? So, although the Quran is not a history book, it gives you sometimes one or two little peep at history. So, for example, if I want to find out who's the pharaoh that under Joseph, I would have to look at the period when the rulers were called kings and not pharaoh. Okay? Because there's a period they were called kings, and there's a period that they were called pharaohs. And it is established in the studies in Egyptology. So give us a understanding where to start. And give us an understanding also that the Pharaoh who dealt with Moses was not the same Pharaoh that dealt under Joseph. Okay, so we have all this historical information, and some of these are these are proofs of the authenticity of the Quran, and that indeed the Prophet was given revelation from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay, these are proofs that they were given the revelation. So, and now as we discuss these things on this level, we have to understand that some Muslims, educated Muslims, when they go to these institutions, these universities, some people lose their faith because they were not exposed to the refutations of these things that they will come to face in universities, because in scholarship, these are the things that people raise. Right? There's even a man and all saying that Mecca wasn't in the place it was. It was in a place called Petra in Jordan. People say all kind of thing. They even went so far and say that the masjids, the early masjids, right, were not aligned to who's calling? It's not aligned to Mecca. Okay? It's not aligned to Mecca. That it is aligned to somewhere else. I don't know who's calling. It didn't point to Mecca. Okay? So it didn't hold on. Yeah. It didn't point to Mecca. No, they have to understand something. Right? When you're looking for the pinpointing the Kaaba, okay? Nowhere in Islamic fiqh is it said that it must be, direct. Right? Because the Prophet said, is that direction, and the Kaaba is between these two. You know what I mean? So the early people, they had the direction, but it wasn't like pinpointed. And they use that to say that facing Mecca was a late thing and whatever. Right? Now we know that there exists a mosque in Arabia. When Allah changed we used to face Jerusalem. And the early Muslims used to face Jerusalem. And then Allah changed it for them to face what? Mecca. Okay? Change it for them to face Mecca. And they were in Salat. And when they got the information, somebody came and was shouting it out. And during this Salat, they make the change. And the Imam moved, the congregation moved, and they continue praying. And it's called the Masjid Qiblatain, the Masjid of two Qiblas in Saudi Arabia. Now, it's only recently, right, in Somalia, right, there's a masjid with two Qiblas. Now, how that happen? Would they copy the masjid in Mecca? Why they have two Qiblas? Because how we know there are two Qiblas? Because they used to make in the wall itself, right? They hollow it out to show which part is the direction. Okay, so it's called a mihrab. They show the direction of the Kaaba. So when they come in the mosque, where to face. So how do we account for that? How do we explain that? We have to remember that there was the first hijrah was to where? Africa, right? Ethiopia, what they call Ethiopia. But Ethiopia of today is not the Ethiopia of that time. The borders of Ethiopia today is not the same borders of that time. Because the king and the place where the prophet went where the companions of the Prophet Islam went, okay, in Africa, today it is part of Eritrea. Now, Eritrea politically was part of Ethiopia. It's only recently when I say recent, in this century, they broke off and formed their own country, right? But the Prophet Islam companions came to that whole area and said it even possible that they went down. All these places are connected, right, to Somalia, because part up to today there's conflict between Somalia and Ethiopia, the modern Ethiopia, because the modern Ethiopia takes some of the land, but all the ancient Ethiopians still control all of that. That's Somaliland, but it was not a state. That's where the Somali people live. It wasn't a state. It's only with the coming of the early 19th century, people established borders and states and whatever. So they said that this masjid, right, was from the early companions who were in Africa, and they went around, they settled there and whatever. And so when they came to Ethiopia, right, the Qibla was still Jerusalem, right? The Qibla was only changed in Medina, all right, after the second Hijrah. But these men left before the second Hijrah, men and women, and they settled in Ethiopia. In Ethiopia, so they took what they knew and oriented the masjid to Jerusalem. So when it changed, right? Because when the Prophet Islam traveled to Medina, okay, some of them came back and went back, right? And perhaps this is how they knew that the Qibla is to Mecca now, no more to Jerusalem. Okay, but when they left, everybody was facing Jerusalem. And it was only during a period in Medina that the Qibla was changed. Okay? But so the two masjids of two Qiblas, you have one in Arabia and one in Africa. Right? So I'm just showing you why it is possible. Okay, and the Somalis preserve it, They're proud of it, because a lot of companions were in that area. Companions, were in that area. Okay, which is sad, but I haven't seen no historical proof as yet that the Negus himself became a Muslim. And some people say, nah, he never became Muslim. There's not enough history. But one of the things on the side that he became a Muslim is because the Prophet Muhammad prayed janazah for him. The community did janazah in absentia. It means that if somebody dies, right, and we hear about it, we could do a janazah for that person with all the body. It's called janazah in absentia. Mean janazah for somebody who's absent. Okay, it can be done. So the Prophet says that when he got the news that the Negus was dead, he organized a janazah for him. So, and we know that the janazah format is done for Muslims. It's not done for Christians or Jews. What the Prophet did when the Jews passed, when the Jews were having their funeral, and the corpse is being taken to the cemetery, the Prophet used to stand up when the corpse is passing, out of respect, But to have a janazah, and at one time there's even a mention that one of his sons was a narrator of hadith, I think in Bukhari, one of them, but I'm still trying to trace down that information. I saw it some years ago. Okay, one of his sons actually were in the isnad, the thread of the hadiths, one of his sons. So it appears like the family became Muslims, but remember he was in a ticklish position because the ruler of the state was the chief archbishop of the church, like England today. The chief archbishop in England is the king or the queen. Right? They're the head of the church. So the queen is not only head of the government, is also head of the religious establishment. And the same thing was done in Ethiopia. So he being Muslim, or becoming a Muslim, he hid his shahada from the rest of the people, because they would have revolt against him if they knew that he became a Muslim. But apparently they had suspicions, but they couldn't prove it. Okay, and in fact, the companions who were in Ethiopia at the time recorded a revolt against the Negus on some of these issues. People actually voted against him. Okay, and the companions didn't take part in the revolt, but they were on the side that supported the Negus, and they were praying that he won. And when he won, when his faction won and put down the rebellion, they were rejoicing. They were happy about it. Okay, we started to rejoice and celebrate that the Prophet, this section won. Because if the other section won, it might have made it bad for them in Ethiopia, because they were under the protection of the king. So this King Negus was favorable towards the Muslims. But if he had lost that uprising, then his position will have changed, and then the position of the Muslims will have changed. They will be under somebody who was not too happy about them being in Ethiopia. So they couldn't take part in the battle, because remember, they were guests, they were immigrants in the country, and they should not take part in that kind of uprising. Okay? So we have all of these things as part of our history. It happened again, in Ethiopian history, before the kingship of Haile Selassie. Right? The king at the time, the emperor at the time, he had no son, he had no heir, male heir. Okay? So, one of his grandson, okay, his name was Isa, and his father, okay, the way the system is in Ethiopia, the king used to marry from a certain tribe. A lot of these tribal people were Muslims. So Haile Selassie's daughter came from, Haile Selassie's wife came from a Muslim family. But then they would have accepted Christianity. So Ras Michael, or Michael, his name was Michael, but they call him Michael. Ras Michael was the father of the person who Menelik was the king, put as the one to take over after him. Okay? But apparently Menelik, Ras Michael hid his Islam, and he ultimately became a Christian, and he swore allegiance to the king at the time, and he was given. He had was like a governor, like a leader, governor of a territory, and he was liked by the emperor because he defeated a lot of the enemies and stuff like that. He apparently became a Christian. But his son started to outwardly practices Islam. Outwardly practice his Islam. And that caused the church fathers now to say, what? If this man is put on the throne, right? We'll have a Muslim as the head of the church. Right? And on top of that time, during that time, the Ottoman Caliph was a regional power from Turkey, right? Ottoman Caliphate. And the Ottoman Caliphate had influence on this Aliyu, right? And the Ottomans now, so they say, well, look, if he become Caliph, then he will have to be backed by the Ottomans, and we will not be able to depose him. So they did some, they did the machinations, they did the thing there, and they end up choosing another cousin, right, which was Haile Selassie. What they call Haile Selassie? He was Rastafari. Rastafari. Tafari was his name. Ras was his title. And they did all kind of thing against this man who was supposed to be the king, because they didn't want a Muslim to be the ruler of the church. It would be real problems. Okay? Real problems. So they hunt him down, they try to kill him. Eventually they captured him and they put him in prison. And he died in that state. Okay? So Haile Selassie was not really supposed to take over. But the church maneuvered things in that way. So, contrary to what a lot of people think, Ethiopia have a high percentage of Muslims. It might even be higher than the Christians. There's a high percentage of Muslims in Ethiopia. Okay? But they had this funny arrangement with the king, that the king will marry somebody from Oromo, one of those peoples, and most of them, the Oromos are Muslims. And on the marriage, she become a Christian, whatever. So the Empress of his last year, I can't remember her name. I can't recall her name right now. I can't recall her name. She was a Muslim and became a Christian. That was a political arrangement that they had in Ethiopia to keep the peace, the level, between the two communities. So things reoccur. Okay, they didn't want another Negus appearing in Ethiopia. They didn't want that. So they closed it down. So these are some of the things that we have to know, because it is important. And it helps us to deal with different people. Some Rastas know about it, some don't know. I've met Rastas who know about it. And there are Rastas who don't know about it. Guys, you tell them, hey, well, they ain't supposed to be on the throne, boys. It's a Muslim. So they'll be quarreling about that. Yeah, inshallah. So we stop there. For tonight. So next week, inshallah, we'll go back to the book itself. Okay, we'll go back to where we left off. Anybody have where we left off? Anybody have any have it written down? I'm trying to where we left off. Sanisa, anybody have it?
I think it's Surah 56.
Hello?
56.
Surah what?
56.
56.
56, yeah.
56.
57. Sorry, 57. That's nowhere. I'm looking back to see what ayat we stop at. 57, 29. We stop at 29.
29.
Yeah, 57, 29. Surah 57, ayat 29.
Yeah, so I just wanted
It's the end of 57 then.
Yeah.
29 is the last verse in 57. So you're supposed to start at 58.
58.
Yeah, the woman who pleads.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So we'll next week we'll start from there, inshallah. We'll go back to
No problem.
so and start back our program. So
Inshallah.
I just wanted to give you all a background and appreciation of the background,
Sunday.
Sorry, the guy name was Lij Yasu, which is Israeli. Sorry, I translate it. His name was Lij Yasu. I don't know if you all seen. This is a picture of him.
Yes.
You all seen it?
That's one. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we've seen it, yeah.
Handsome guy.
So that's the name they took the Emancipation Support Committee and them took to name the village Lij Yasu.
Yeah. I know the name after him, but perhaps another person. But he's Lij Yasu.
Okay.
But it's Lij. I know Lij. You sure there is there's the name at the village, Lij Yasu village.
Yeah, at one time, they had it at the Lij Yasu village, and if it still remains the same. The emancipation.
That is really interesting, huh?
Yeah.
I never knew that. In fact,
And if Finba online, Finba could verify.
I never pay attention to it. So look at this. You see him in his Muslim garb here.
Pull it up a little more. Right.
See him? And you see what it said
That's
at
in
the
him.
bottom there? You see what it said at the bottom? Palace coup. You seen it?
Yeah, seen it.
Yeah, that is in there.
Right. The
When you have
name of the
chance,
village was the Lejiasu Omowale village. That's the same person? Oh no.
yeah, no. Oh, I know what happened. There was a guy who used to be in Jack and all them around the cultural thing. His name was Lij Yasu Umawali.
Oh, so it's him.
So they named the village after him. And
Oh,
he
okay,
took that
okay.
name from this guy.
From this guy.
Right?
Right,
Yeah,
yeah.
he took that name from this guy. Okay? When you have time you could Google him and see, you know, it's a very interesting
Yeah, I'll do that.
character.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
Legias, very interesting character. You know, so
You have a look like Kwame
glad you
Ture
could.
there.
Yeah, he looked like Amiture. So you can imagine if he really become the the ruler of Ethiopia. Look back at that. Yes,
Wow.
they might have a revolt at that time. You know, because the Western powers was supporting Ethiopia at the time, right? And they would not want that man on the throne because they were opposing the Ottomans, who were the major power at the time. And then when the Ottomans have a stronghold in Africa. Right? So there's a lot of politics behind this. Inshallah. So there's just an appreciation. Look how far the issue of the Quran does be. You know?
Tell you.
And we have to remember when they went there, the king asked them, well, what did this man brought? What is this revelation he brought? You want to know what's the revelation? And the Jafar, the son, Ali's brother, the son of Abu Talib, the cousin of the Prophet Islam, he was the leader. And he recited Surah Maryam, right, for the king and the archbishops. And he had them crying.
Well, that was the perfect thing to recite.
Yes, brother, because
About
they have a big respect for Mary in Ethiopia, right?
Yeah.
So policy, he was wise politically, right?
Mm-hmm.
So and this one saying, if you say the Quran is not from, I did not consider it important. You know, why you recite it to the king?
Exactly.
You can't tell the king, you know, we don't believe in idols. You know, no. The king wanted to hear what did this prophet brought.
Mm-hmm.
He started the revelation, and he said that the saying of that and his scripture is from one light, something like that, some statement he made like that.
Yeah.
Okay, so that backs up the point about, you know, whether the companions or the Prophet Islam didn't consider the Quran. It's only later on Muslims do that. You know, this is nonsense. The Quran has always been the center of Islamic studies, the center of spirituality. Look at Africa and other places where Islam went, right? Traditional. Look, I'm talking about the modern times. Go back to the traditional villages and things. They have Quranic schools. You know, in Africa, they still write on the board, the law, they call it a law. They still write on the board with ink from charcoal. Right? They still write it on the board. Just like they did many years ago. Just as in the Prophet Islam time. The same thing. They still write on this board. And when they wash it off, because you have to reuse the board. They still drink the water. So inshallah. But they have respect for the Quran. Right? In fact, another strong point is there was a battle. Huh? There was a battle, and there was too much Hafiz were dying, and that's why the Caliph said, "Look, we have to write down this thing. We have to write it down in one book." You know, because the people who were guarding the Quran, the Hafiz, You know, they were dying. And there was not the government didn't take no official position to make the Quran in a book form. Just left it to people. Some people had their own writing things. Ali had his own Quran we collected, and this one had the Quran they collected, and that one had the Quran. It was not the state didn't do it then. Officialize this is the Quran. They left it to the people, the scholars, and them in the society. You know, the teachers, they had the Quran and they said teach it. Right? But the state came in and said, look, officially, we get involved and this is it.
So the Lid Jiasu, right? The emperor.
Mm-hmm.
Is there significance with it? Like in his history, they have his dynasty as the House of Solomon.
Yeah, what happened is that according to the Ethiopians, right? They claim that Sheba, you know, the Queen of Sheba,
Mm-hmm.
that she had a child, right, called Menelik, and this child went back to Ethiopia. Well, according to them, he stole the Ark of the Covenant and took it back to Ethiopia, according to them. Right? He took the Ark. This thing might pop up just now, right? And he took fast. He stole the Ark of they said he stole the Ark of the Covenant and went back to Ethiopia, and he formed a dynasty called the Solomon dynasty. And also said that there was the Sheba had a maid, and they said that she had a child also from Solomon, and so there was a competing dynasty. There are two dynasties from Solomon, and the one from Sheba ended up destroying those who came from the maid, because they had a ruling a dynasty also, right? But they came to be from Solomon, descendant of Solomon, This is what they claim, and they claim to still have the Ark of the Covenant. That's what they say. Allah knows best, you know.
When he was Muslim, he was buried under Christian rights.
I'm not sure. You see, they lock him up and they threw him in jail and they left him later rat, you know. So and he died. You know what kind of funeral they give him? They give him a funeral at all.
Because they have him as buried as Christian, you know, under the Christian
Yeah, it's possible.
or the Ethiopian Orthodox kind of thing.
Church, yeah, it's
But
possible.
unconfirmed allegations. He had unconfirmed allegations of conversion to Islam.
Yeah,
That's what they put his religion as.
yeah. He was a Muslim, but you see, you know, we gotta remember too. He came from Muslim background, and it's only his father adopted Christianity, you know.
But he was buried on the grounds of a church.
Yeah, I went out that.
Marcos Church.
Yeah. Because if he was a Christian, then why didn't want him to be the ruler?
Yeah.
It's because of his Islamic leanings, as they say. His leanings towards Islam. All right. Inshallah.
All right, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum.
Okay, wa alaikum salam. Shahid? Shahid?
Yeah.
Yeah, when you want me to do this thing with the nikahs, the marriages thing? Well, let me know now, right?
All right, yeah. Inshallah, yeah.
So, everybody. Yeah?
For emancipation, was the theme this year is freedom, justice, and equality.
Okay.
But I think I will add in memory of Elder Khalid. One time.
Because he was pivotal in helping in going towards that. I will talk about that. You know.
Mm-hmm.
Inshallah, I'll talk about that.
Okay.
Okay, and then pass on my answer. Again, some of these people talking about African thing and nonsense. Especially Mr. Abbasi Jawad. I'm coming for you
Okay,
here.
but Hassan, what about the Muslims in
Maulana, pause.
Timbuktu? Who were they?
Maulana, pause. Maulana, pause 1 second.
They
Pause
were
1
Africans.
second. Let me just stop the recording